I mean, you really can't write this stuff, Norman, when you think you've seen it all. Stories like this come along. Afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian. Well, I would twin it with a well-known fictional film called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a very popular film back in, I think it was the 80s. Well, our criminal justice system and the parole room system in Britain today is equivalent to the reality of the asylum system. The decisions on sentencing are as bad as I've ever seen. And those that are released from prison, having committed the most appalling of crimes, are equivalent. They're often mad decisions. And every time their name arises, the families, the victims' families, live or relive the true horror of a true life sentence. And you're right. I mean, in this case, this individual, Pitchfork, he murdered two young girls, 15 years of age. He strangled them and he murdered them, raped them, 2 different times, 3 years apart, back in the 80s. He got 30 years in 1988. That was reduced to 28 years in 2009 on an appeal. And he'd also indecently exposed himself to 1,000 women. Now, somebody sane, please tell me that this is a rational decision, the right decision to protect society and send the right message out to the public, because this guy is clearly a danger to women until every day, every breath he's got in his body, until it finishes.
And how do you, I mean, who knows what goes on? And, you know, the parole board isn't, you know, 2 people. It's a lot of people involved in these decisions. What could you imagine, Norman, the thought process would be? Bearing in mind, I mean, this isn't just a case of discussing his first release. This will be the second time, because, of course, he was released back in 2022 and 2021 and breached his conditions. So we know this man can't be trusted.
Well, what they said, I read up on the case, the parole board said there were some anomalies which weren't actually correct. But to be quite honest with you, that's pretty irrelevant. From what I understand, he was approaching young girls.
Yeah.
What was he convicted for? Murdering 2 young girls.
Correct.
What was he convicted for? Indecently exposing himself to over 1,000 women. 2 or 3 decades earlier, Ian, for the murder and rape of one 15-year-old girl, he would have been strung up, he would have been hung, and he would have received the appropriate sentence. This guy went on 3 years later to do exactly the same to another girl. He got 30 years. Now, that's no life sentence. It's equivalent today to probably about 2.5 times a life sentence. Yeah. Now, when you think about it, he's out. The 2 young girls are in the ground. The families have lived torture in the true life sentence, and here they see him and those that are alive now walking the streets free. It's bizarre, and I open this chat in relation to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This criminal justice system we have today and the parole room, the parole board system we have today is the reality of a criminal justice system constantly fighting over the cuckoo's nest, and it's the public and victims that actually stare in amazement at what's happened.
Absolutely.
To this one country.
And the other story we mentioned in all of this, Norman, was another serial killer, another child rapist, Levi Belfield. This man, of course, is serving 2 whole life orders. And for some curious reason, and who knows how the hell this works, he's been granted permission to get married.
Again, I can only ditto the last conversation, but you're absolutely right. The Human Rights Act, which he relies on, and the Marriage Act, which he relies on, the Human Rights Act, let's pick that one up first. The Human Rights Act was brought into being because of the atrocities at Auschwitz in the Second World War. Absolutely right. Humans have the right, even when they have been caught as an enemy, to be given some sort of fair dignity in treatment, food, and if they are put in a concentration camp or if they're put in prison, detained, they have to have human rights. I haven't got a problem with that. Levi Belfield gave none of the humans that he murdered any rights whatsoever. He murdered 3 young girls, devastated many. He actually caused fear amongst millions of people. I live in Twickenham. Amelia de Lagrange was murdered a mile from where I live. Each morning I sit by Twickenham Green and have a coffee and have a little think, and I often look across and see the devastation that he caused to the family of Amelia de Lagrange, and hundreds, if not thousands, of women living locally were in fear for years. Yet here we are listening to him now, wanting to get married. He's serving a true life sentence. And there comes a time when we tell our offenders, if your offending is so serious and so persistent that the public need to be protected from you, whilst you're serving a term of imprisonment, there are certain rights that should be declined from you.